I read one time a great quote that the only thing new to us is the history we don't know.
I think it's important to let your children know what the history is, who your ancestors were, and what their values were. Values sometimes are changing going down through the years. I think what's most important in my growing up and in this community is family and the church.
We just thank you so much for all the great, wonderful things you do for us each and every day.
It meant a lot to me because I think growing up in a small town, you know more people know you.
Living in a small town, we used to say if you did anything wrong, it was going to beat you home. So it definitely kept you in check. It works well for morals, character.
Nothing good comes easy. It takes time. This farm today is not like how it started out. So when you begin something, to maintain that walk with it, respect.
This is Sawyer, this is Sophia, this is McKenna, and we are the great-grandchildren.
One reason for telling this story is so that those great-grandchildren know that they came from a very long line of good people with hard work ethic and a focus on education, a focus on serving their country. And your role as a descendant of that Fowler heritage is to have respect for where you came from.
It's really nice to know that you can go back to 1880s and know the history of the farm already.
Come on, girl.
It takes so many people. It's just not a mother and a father that raise those children. It took everyone.
You learn from history. We make mistakes in history. It's part of establishing a legacy that you become better. Well, how can you become better if you don't know what you did wrong?
I think to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the importance of understanding that your forebears worked hard to make your life possible.
Our family built this farm and preserved it, and so now we're able to enjoy this land while it is here.
You know, deep inside of us, there's always this yearning to know where we came from. And the Fowler family can answer that question with a lot of specificity.
The first Fowler we discovered was William. He was born in 1786, we do know that, and he came here from North Carolina. He acquired some of the farm, some of the land from a foreclosure. He was married to Molly Brown. William and Molly had one child that we know of, a son. His name was Jesse. And that's where we start with the line because Jesse had 12 children. What we know about Jesse was he was said to have the strictest integrity, scrupulously honest in all of his dealings, true to his church, his God, and his country, and his good influence will tell upon his children for generations to come. And I thought that's a pretty good thing for anybody to have said about them.
I, William Fowler, do agree to pay Jesse Fowler 1 ear of corn a year during the time I may live for all the land conveyed to me, said William Fowler, by deed leasing date the 3rd day of May, 1842.
Years later, they were right in the midst of the Civil War, so children went at an early age, 16-year-olds. So Jesse's son Alan died, and they wanted Jesse to replace him, but instead Jesse's other son, 16-year-old Furman, went in his place. I think it's important to remember about the Civil War because it is a part of our history. It's a part of Southern history. Jesse had 3 sons-in-law who also died in the Civil War. So it was a sad time, a hard time for people. Jesse's youngest son, M.W., Major William, was the only one who stayed with the farm. Farming in those early days was very hard. The women worked, children worked. Everything was done by hand, plows pulled by mules. Tobacco was set by hand with a planter. This is the way they planted tobacco, with this old planter. Make the hole, press the lever. Men usually did the planter. The women dropped the plants into the planter. The kids would bring buckets of water. The water had to go in here. It was a hard life back then, but it was a good and happy life because families worked together. Twist it, stamp it.
Tell me whether you carried water or not.
I did carry water. I don't have a lot of stories about the Civil War, more from World War I, where Fred's Uncle Frank served there.
I saw a considerable part of England, and I don't blame the English for fighting to the last for such a countryside as theirs.
And then in World War II, several of Fred's brothers who served.
My father, Dan, served in the military, along with so many in the Fowler family. It showed a love for their country. He absolutely had his pitfalls in life, but he was very proud to have served.
One of the people that really instilled some vast military values was Paul. He shared a story about he couldn't sleep one night. His unit was in a building, so he got up and there was an apple orchard. He went out and sat out in the orchard. Well, German artillery hit the house he was in. Everybody was killed. Paul said that he knew then that the Lord had other things in mind for him. I'm going, this ain't a bad foundation to go on. Hard work, you will be rewarded for it. The Lord has a plan for you. Listen, do the best you can.
All indications are that the Jerrys intend to fight to the last man, and they have plenty of them left. I would hate to think of my younger brothers, or anyone for that matter, having to go through what we are.
Tobacco was a big crop for the Fowler family. Most of the acreage was tobacco. They did rotate crops. And we know that it was the king crop of the Mullins community for so long.
The building you're in is actually the old Mullins Depot. So all of the family farmers relied on this community, and Mullins relied on them and their fortunes. Everything was completely intertwined here as far as farms, families, and the community. In Mullins, tobacco was king. Mullins was established in 1872. We were the largest tobacco auction town in the state of South Carolina. So the farmers would come in and they would sell their tobacco. You also had the buyers that would actually stay here during the season, and they would help sustain the town. And then the business owners here in Mullins, that would actually help them bring more business in. In 1938, 1939, 101 million pounds of tobacco was auctioned in South Carolina, and Mullins was responsible for 42 million of that 101 million. We were tobacco, tobacco, tobacco all the way through our town's history. People would actually come from towns over to shop here because the quality was so wonderful in Mullins, South Carolina. I had a citizen tell me that trying to find a parking spot on Main Street was like trying to find a parking spot at the mall on Christmas Eve. It was so busy.
Tobacco, from the time of Sir Walter Raleigh to this day, a product of prime importance to the economy of this region.
Warehouses were everywhere. Crops were being bustled into town. So for anything to come into the realm of threatening that crop, it impacted everyone. We did find correspondence that pretty soon farmers might be hearing a proliferation of information about tobacco being harmful to your health, and that they should not worry about this. There was no scientific data to support it, and that fear not.
The demand for tobacco in the U.S. has gone way down over the years, and it's still getting less. The allotment system has been bought out years ago, which switched the power to the actual tobacco companies, and that's who we deal with now.
There's still one warehouse in Mullins that receives tobacco.
Well, this is wheat in this field here, and we've got corn across the road, and these other fields will be planted in soybeans.
My children grew up working on this farm from little on up. I'm Ella Moore, and I was married to Paul Moore. Mr. Paul Fowler was retiring from farming, so my husband was ready to come, and we moved here in 1969. Nobody farmed like he did, and I remember him tilling the soil, which they had not done here. He could grow good crops.
When Daddy passed away in '86, I was still in high school. We took it over, and here we are today. My generation was probably some of the last high school kids that actually worked on the farm for the most part, and if you get to talking to them long enough, some of the best memories that they have was out there on the farm. And now that you've got older, you think back on them times and laugh about some of the crazy things that we done.
I'm third generation farmer. I didn't know that I had an option and don't know how to do anything else, but I can't imagine doing anything else. What I love about farming is there's no walls to look at every day. You're doing something different all the time. You're out here on the land doing what I think I know how to do.
I think that's something that you try to carry on to the next generation is integrity, commitment, hard work ethic, kind of the old roll your sleeves up and go to work. That's what Dad did. Without a doubt, his passion was the store. He was here at the store. His commitment to the customers has carried through to today. I tried to carry that on. Don't know if I carry it like he did.
Dad had so many good things going on, and he made them look easy. And I know they weren't easy because I've lived through a lot of those too. He and Mom both taught us not to give up. Roll those sleeves up, no matter whether you're rich or not. You're rich in family.
He was incredibly competitive. He was an athlete, and we joke that he didn't want to farm and that he would get off the farm to go play football so he wouldn't have to work. He was adamant that his 3 children finish school, he and my mother both. The whole family was focused on education. And so many of my father, Fred's siblings became teachers and coaches and athletes. There was a time if you visited the Fowler farm, amidst all the tobacco fields, you would see this tennis court behind my grandmother's house. My Uncle John built this court so that he could teach and play tennis. And John Fowler and his sister Joyce Fowler were tennis coaches and tennis champions. And in fact, they are both memorialized in the South Carolina Tobacco Museum here in Mullins, South Carolina.
With a family that large and going that far back, you're going to have different personalities. There were quite a few notable characters in the Fowler family.
I remember Papa, so sweet. He knew that I loved the way the cured tobacco smelled. And so he gave me one leaf that was just perfect. It fit right in my little doll suitcase.
He was a kind-hearted man to be so big. I always thought, wow, he just looked so massive to me. He was always kind to the kids.
The granddaughters got great treatment. The grandsons were always viewed as potential farmhands.
Yes, and we worked hard, but we also received a lot of rewards. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. If I could have bolted for somewhere else like Egypt and been a slave, I would have gone willingly.
Yeah. My grandfather never asked me to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He never lied to me. And he said, if things go bad, let me know early, maybe we can fix it. And that's pretty much been a North Star for me.
And he would put us up to mischief constantly, and we would get in trouble with Mama, and then she would dawn on her, wait a minute. She would say, John, did you put those children up to that?
Yep.
I remember Mama was a fantastic cook.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Her cakes especially, I remember.
I was a small child, I'd say probably 3, 4 years old, and Miss Mitty knew I loved caramel cake. And they had baked one, and it was up on the counter in the kitchen. So I got a chair, slid it over, and walked across the counter. But when I got near the cake, I slipped. And I planted my little foot right in the middle of it. And of course that elicited a scream or two from everybody. And Mama came running in, and somebody said, Billy has ruined the cake. And she goes, it's all right, it's Billy. That's my earliest memory of this place.
I think my earliest remembrance here was being charged with the offense of stepping in the cake.
She expected the children to behave. You needed to understand when you left home, you were representing her and representing the family. And it was important then that you knew how to behave yourself. One of the other memories I have was of the annual visit from Uncle Frank.
I think Uncle Frank was instrumental in helping Papa sometimes through those tough years that they lived through.
He was a regimental surgeon in World War I. That's when he said he learned how inhuman one man can be to another.
Our mother, Louise, was the oldest of the 8 children, and she always felt tremendous responsibility. Everybody in the family was supposed to take care of each other.
I can remember Mother teaching me from the time I was real small in saying my prayers every night. God bless everybody.
Recite all the aunts, uncles, cousins.
Aunts, uncles, cousins.
My mother, she taught me about unconditional love.
We were spoiled rotten by our Uncle John, Aunt Joyce, and Aunt Grace, who were always here in the summer when we came.
I remember coming down and I'd be down here and Mother and Daddy would be somewhere and I was supposed to be studying. And Grace would come in, she'd say, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm studying. And she'd say, well, you might want to turn the book around. You've got it upside down. But she wouldn't tell anybody. She'd keep it just between us.
Now Mama is here and she is still inspiring all of us to, enjoy this land while it is here.
The best thing was when Mama texted for the first time.
Yes.
Mama sent the group text to all of us. It was like Sunday dinner was ready. And I didn't answer because I thought it was like an error. And Bridget said, Mama?
It's crazy to think that someone that was married to Papa could do that, so.
One thing I've learned from Mama, enjoy and admire nature and just kind of soak it all in, let it absorb and just breathe for a moment.
I can't talk. I love them all. The big 2-story house up at the front of the property was where all of the Fowler children grew up. It was built in 1880 by Jesse and his son, Major William. That house now has family from the 7th generation, my granddaughter.
It's the land I grew up on and now my kids can grow up on. And it still looks pretty much the way it did back then, just a little more open. It's nice to know that there's life inside of the walls again.
I think so often how fortunate we are that our parents chose Mullins. It still has its struggles economically, but there's a lot of people that have not given up on Mullins.
When I come around that corner and I see those fields, it is a heartwarming, settling place to know that this is where everyone was and that everyone still gathers.
No matter where I end up, I mean, to know that I have home here, I can always come back and visit family and see friends, and the memories that are left on the land from this place, I'll always be able to look back on.
1, 2, 3, picture.
I do feel like I'm part of history. It's amazing to see that it's still a working farm so many years later, and it would be a blessing to see it even when I'm older, for it to continue to be a working farm.
The soil here, it says, I've been here longer than you and I'm going to be here when you're gone. And there's a huge respect for that. You can walk onto the edge of the farm and look back into the sunset, and you can almost imagine that you were there with your great-grandfather.
You know, our family worked hard and built this farm and preserved it, and so now we're able to allow our kids to enjoy it, but also teach them, you know, this isn't just here because it just grew to this. You know, I think that when our children grow up and watch this, they'll remember being out here and playing, you know, and then down the road they can say, my family has Fowler Farm in Mullins, South Carolina.
It's a family business, so you know, it goes back to my mom, dad, grandparents.